So I got a question the other day in the comments asking basically how I got into this mess. How did somebody get wrapped up into this? And another subscriber actually commented, which was pretty much both of our stories intertwined. But I thought it was a good time to hit this topic and go over it just a little bit. I know I've talked a little bit about it in a lot of the different videos, but I haven't made a video to talk specifically about the whole situation. So, and I'm gonna try to consolidate this down to about 10 or 15 minutes. So I'm going to try to go through this quick, and if there's other questions, just let me know, and we can I can either answer those in the comments, or I can make a subsequent video to talk about that. So bottom line is, I didn't really have a lot of confidence when I was younger. Didn't really date. Didn't feel like anyone would be interested, so I didn't have a lot of confidence or self-esteem in that area. Now, I had confidence in other areas, like in my photography and school and stuff like that, but in relationships, it wasn't there. And I attribute that a lot to the family of origin and the relationships I had with my parents and stuff like that. It was a mess. I ended up staying with my mom. My brother ended up staying with my dad. In retrospect, my mom was, I firmly believe, a covert narcissist or an overt narcissist, depending on how you look at it. And that kind of formulated my my growing up stages and stuff like that. So the other thing on this is I met and married my wife really young. Actually, if I remember correctly, I think our first date was when I was 19, shortly after turning 19. She's a couple years older, so she was 22. I was in the process of going into the Air Force, and she was initially going to do that as well. So that's kind of how we initially met. Now, at the time, I figured she wouldn't have any interest in me. I was okay with being friends with her, and that's kind of the way it started. My recruiter was the one who actually I'm kind of an anomaly. I actually was friends with my recruiter, and to this day we still stay in contact. Not a lot, but Facebook friends and stuff like that. I still really like the guy. I know a lot of people in the military don't really like their recruiters. I'm in a different category in that regard. But he did encourage me to ask her out, and he was kind of playing matchmaker. I don't think he intended for us to ever get married, but he just thought that we got along well, and that we could have some fun before we went into the service. So the thing is when I first went out with her, when I asked her out, she said yes, and we went out on that first date. I was pretty much done. I mean, I was sucked in, drank the Kool-Aid, and I had this illusion of what I thought the relationship was, and I was in it. I mean, I knew we were going to get married, and I don't even remember how that even came up. Because before we started dating in that September, I had went into the Air Force in November, so September, October, November. So basic training, November, December. So I spent Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's in basic training, and then ended up in tech school. And before I went off to basic training, we had decided to get married. Now here's the thing, even with that, there were times where things would happen where I'm like, holy crap, this doesn't feel right. This person seems to be a little clingy, a little, just warning for it. Red flags were going off. And I would have those, I would listen to them, and then I would talk with her, and we'd finally re-engage, and then I would change my mind and say, no, this is the person that I want to be with, this is right, and I would reconvince myself. There was even actually a point whenever she came to visit me when I was in tech school, where it started out to where it was like, logically, it's like, this doesn't make any sense. We need to just wait. We're going too fast. We need to slow down. And to be perfectly honest, I still don't remember what happened. I remember by the beginning, like the first part of the trip, we were talking about waiting. By the end of the trip, I had convinced myself that, nope, we were going to get married. It was the right thing to do. And we ended up doing that. So we basically dated for a few months, went into, and already planned to get married, and, from September, and then I was, the following year in 90, we were married in April. Even after we were married, there were a lot of warning signs. There were things that just didn't seem right. There were comments about, she had big abandonment issues. She was convinced I was going to leave her, and her trust level wasn't really high. I remember at one point, I think whenever I was talking about claiming taxes, I was doing the, married but at the higher single rate or something like that, and she freaked out because that I wasn't claiming her with the government or something. I mean, so there were all of these signs that I chose to ignore. I mean, it was one of those things where I was like, nope, we loved each other. I loved her. She loved me. We were in it together. We were going to work it together. Everyone has issues. Everyone has their own little idiosyncrasies. So I kept making excuses to convince myself that the problems were just normal problems that everyone has, but that the core fundamental of the relationship was that we loved each other. Now, this is a part of the theme that's what's played out through the entire relationship. So every time something would happen, that's kind of what I would fall back on. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the specifics of the relationship, but I will tell you that 3 months into the marriage, some things fundamentally changed, and I actually had an epiphany on where I thought, okay, well, I understand why people cheat. I understand now. I get why people cheat, because when you're being basically rejected on a constant basis, I think the normal reaction is to seek it out someplace else, either because you need it or because you want to hurt the other person. Me personally, I thought that doing that would be the most cruel thing you could do to somebody, so it wasn't in my character to do that, so I refused to go that route, which is probably a good reason why the relationship lasted as long as it did, over 20 years, until I finally woke up. I mean, when I finally realized there was a fundamental change, and I'll get to that in a minute, but I want to just keep progressing. So as this was going on, and I was making those excuses, and I wanted that illusion to be true, right? I wanted the picture in my head of what I thought the relationship was to be true, right? So I would go back into what I was talking about before, convincing myself and rationalizing it, making all of these excuses and whatnot to deal with it. And in retrospect, looking back at it, it was completely, it was unfortunate, because I should have, if I would have had more confidence in myself, better boundaries for myself, understood what real love was, because I didn't have that growing up. So a lot of what was happening, unfortunately, seemed very normal to me, right? Because there wasn't a good there wasn't a good relationship with my mom, and there was a non-existent relationship with my dad. So that was where I was coming from. So whenever the dating started, or the short-term dating started with my now ex, that the love bombing and the mirroring and everything just seemed over the top. Once the relationship was in place and we were married, and then a few months later when things started to change, I was like, well, okay, all right, that was an illusion, but basically it's still there, but this is the way people normally treat each other anyway. So again, I was making excuses for it. So the other thing is every time that she would give me breadcrumbs, it was like it was the best thing ever. I mean, it wasn't like it was breadcrumbs. It was like, oh my God, she actually thought about me, that type of thing, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. And it's tough to talk about this, because pretty much I sound like a knucklehead, right? And I think a lot of us have issues with that, because that's kind of the way we feel, right? We get in these relationships, they start to go south. We don't want to admit the mistake or see the mistake, so we keep trying to work towards it. We keep trying to rationalize it. We keep trying to pretend that illusion that we had in the beginning was real, and trying to get back to it. And that's exactly what I was doing. So the thing is, so here I have 20 years of stress, anxiety, self-doubt, feeling like my entire life is wrapped up around her, which it really was. And there were different reasons that I was able to convince myself to stay. When I was in the military, I was younger, lower rank, and any of you who've been in the military will understand this, but whenever you're married, you're entitled to base housing and housing allowances and stuff like that. Well, if you're not married, they treat you significantly different. And so I would convince myself, well, I don't want to break up. And I don't want to end this marriage because, basically we really love each other and we're just having we're just mad at each other at this point in time or whatever. And is it really worth it to throw this whole relationship away to, move back into the dorms and whatever? I mean, there were all kinds of things that I would convince myself that there was, the reason to keep trying to work forward on it. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have fallen into the same trap. So what fundamentally changed for me, and keep in mind, and you can probably tell, being married 20 years, and you guys know how old my kids are. Actually, see, I keep forgetting. It's like 22 years from the divorce. It's been about 5 years, so 27. So, as you can see, we waited a long time before we actually had kids. Actually, I didn't have kids until we got out of the military. And to be perfectly honest, I think that happened because I finally, since I didn't have some of those other issues, when I finally got frustrated, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to live this way anymore. Every once in a while, I would have these moments of clarity, and I did. I actually had said at one point, okay, I'm done. I'm not living like this anymore. If things don't change, you can get back in the car, you can drive back to your home state, and we can just end this now. She freaking deer in the headlights. Everything changed. She got pregnant, amazingly enough, and I was under the impression that, oh my God, if we finally had this conversation, things are better. Everything's great. So I was convincing myself every year that everything was better. When my son he has a disability, like I've talked about in the past. When that happened, I also figured that us making it through it, because a lot of times that destroys a relationship, I would find all these different scenarios to make me think that this was the right thing. But even during the course of all this was a very stressful, anxiety-filled, confusing relationship. The double binds were constant. The gaslighting was all the time, but it was subtle, right? I mean, so there would be these good times and these bad times. So, which is normal, it's normally what happens, right? They push your buttons. It's like this cat and mouse thing. They push your buttons, they get you wound up, then they back off. They push your buttons and they back off. And that's what was going on. So what ultimately happened is nothing really traumatic happened. It was just, and I've talked about this before, but I got to the point that I was really, really happy in life. And things were going really, really well. And my stress levels had calmed down. My thoughts for the future, instead of being really anxious about it, I was really excited about it. So the dynamic had shifted, and it drove her crazy because she didn't have control over me anymore. And she basically sabotaged the relationship. She didn't cheat or anything. It was basically pushing my buttons on a reoccurring basis, dragging me back down to that pit of hell that was the previous, 18 years of the relationship. I remember being confused by it because I didn't understand. I didn't understand how I could remember that I was doing really well. And I had like a year period where things were going really, really well. And then it felt like all of a sudden I was back in this nightmare. And what ultimately happened is, when I was talking, it rolls back into the beginning conversation, is I had that fundamental belief that we truly loved each other, and that was the core foundation. Well, I started questioning that, right? Because I remember at one point we had a conversation and she had made a comment to me, you don't even know who I am. And we've talked a lot about how narcissists will tell you exactly what's going on, to your face, and you just don't believe it because it doesn't seem real, even though they're being honest to us. And that's kind of what happened. She made this comment, and I took a step back, and it was two parts. I remember thinking, oh crap, she's right. She's not the person that I thought she was. And it started making sense. So everything over the last 20 plus years started making sense. And then I went back to, and I was kind of bummed, and I was like, but at least we still love each other. All right, now I understand what I'm dealing with. I understand who the person is. So I think I can readjust. I'm not thrilled about it, but I can, move forward with it. And then what happened for me is I started questioning, did she really love me? And I actually asked. I remember the first time I asked. Actually, I think the first time I asked, I think the answer was, of course, right? It was just a quick answer. But the actions weren't following the words. And I remember asking, a little bit later, I'm like, do you really love me or care about me? And the answer was, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm still trying to decide. You know, it was all these stupid little games. And then that just destroyed it for me. I mean, when it was like, oh my God, the entire foundation of this relationship is built on a lie, which we all know. I mean, these people with personality disorders, unfortunately, cannot love. They can't, well, if they can do it, they can do it in the way they can do it, but they can't do it in a way that's a healthy way, that the expectations that we have for love. And that destroyed it. I mean, that pretty much took, I mean, I had her on a pedestal, which is a bad sign right off the bat there, for the entire part of the marriage. She was able to easily manipulate me, give me those breadcrumbs like I was talking about before to get me back in line. And she tried, towards the end, she tried to go through her normal steps to get me back in line. But it was already too damaged. Everything was falling apart. And I ultimately got to the point where I'm like, you know what? I deserve a chance to have a genuine life. Now, this was before I knew about narcissism, knew about NPD and all the different, you know, wonderful things that we all are experiencing on that. And I was just like, okay, you don't, my mind, you don't really care about me. You must want something else. You know, so you can see the fallacy there is that I didn't have a fundamental understanding of what the situation was. And I was like, look, I deserve an opportunity to be happy, to have a chance to be happy, to not live in chaos and not live in this constant, you know, sense of rejection and you know, just all the different, just the different crazy that was going on. All right, so I mean, to kind of summarize this, so how did I get in this mess? It was not having a good foundation as a child going into adulthood. And then what happened is with that, the second someone love bombed me, and you know, they hit the criteria. I mean, you know, they hit the criteria of what I thought I was looking for and treated me, or at least said back to the things to me that what I would be looking for in a partner, and I was hooked. And I think that's the case for most of us. That's the case for most of us who have bad family of origins, and you already starting out without the confidence in yourself, without the good solid boundaries, with, you know, really understanding who you are and being happy with yourself, and you're putting that all on someone else, and it's a recipe for disaster, right? Now, I've talked before about other people who can have great families and have a good foundation and still get sucked into this. And primarily that's because of the love bombing and that initial stage, because you're basically entrapped and manipulated in the beginning. The difference I would say with those is most of the time people who had good families, those relationships fall apart really quick because they won't put up with it. At some point it's like, no, this is not right, and they move on. You take somebody like in my situation, where you make all these excuses and you're trying to make this illusion a reality, and you don't have that confidence and you don't have that those good boundaries and that good sense of self, and it's just a recipe for disaster. So I'm not sure if I've actually made another video about this before, but it was a really good question. I wanted to talk about it. I'm doing this really quick. I mean, this video is a little bit longer than I anticipated. If anybody has any other questions about that, let me know and I can answer them in another video. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's real easy to get sucked in on these things, and it's really hard to get out. In my situation, I got out because I finally had, you know, the fog started lifting and I started seeing reality, so I wanted to change. Honestly, the way things were going, if things wouldn't have changed, more than likely it would have gotten progressively worse until she probably would have left me. Technically, she kind of already discarded me, depending on how you look at it, before. So on that, if you want to talk about this more in the comments, please do that below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you like the channel, please subscribe. If you have not gone over to the website, dadsurvivingdivorce.com, and sign up for the newsletter, please do that. And I will chat with you guys on the next video. So take care. Bye.